Hi guys, Nirg here, and yes, it's Nirg and not Nirg, and today I'm going to be demonstrating how chains work in screwdrivers, because there's a lot of bugs with chains, which makes it very confusing for new players, and also some people just don't know how they work. So I'm going to demonstrate how they work, and hopefully you learn something. So the first thing we gotta do is we gotta first make a chain. And to make a chain, first you need two gears that are on the same plane as each other. So, for example, these two gears are on the same plane as each other, right? And the same plane just means that they would line up if you move them together, and they would transmit power like that. So, after you've placed your two gears, you can then take your chain, and you can click one gear and click the other gear. And you can also repeat that for as many gears as you want, but it has to be two or more gears. The chain will not appear, and it won't even work if you click one gear. You need to click more than one. After you do that, and you can see I did it out of instinct, you need to select any other piece, otherwise the chain will not finalize. So you can do that with the middle click, very useful, or you can just select something out of the inventory. Basically what that does is it just finalizes the chain, and if you don't do that, you might get some errors in your calculation. So very important to do that, otherwise you'll experience some bugs. And yeah, that's basically how chains work, right? In this example, it's a very simple example. One second, let me place this engine. Where we are just using it to move the center of mass closer towards the center. So, unlike if I had placed this engine right here, I had now placed over here, just to change the center of mass. This is one very good example of how you can use it, right? Because it would take a lot more weight to add more gears to gear this engine to the front axle. And now you can do it very simply with just a chain. And it works amazingly well. But let me show you a few bugs with the chains. This first bug is one that I would like to call impossible chain bug. So basically, this is just one setup, but there are many different ways that this can happen. If you were to chain these gears together, you can see that this works, and as soon as I click the third one, the chain disappears, right? And how this happens because it's trying to render the chain, but the geometry to render the chain just doesn't work. It's impossible. So the chain just doesn't render, but it is still there. As you can see, if I add an engine, you can see that these are linked together, even though they're not. The gears aren't meshing together. It still works. It just doesn't show up, right? And this is still a valid chain. Next thing that I would like to go over is rigid chain bug. And this is less of a bug and more of a feature, because I don't think that this is getting removed. So if you had a setup like this, right? Let me attach my engine. This works perfectly normal because it's this axle is attached here, this axle is attached here to these beams, and everything is attached, and it works perfectly. Now, if I were to remove this beam, you might expect that this engine and this axle would fall out of the car. But when I calculate it, it works perfectly fine. And this is how the rigid chains work, where chains create rigid connections between two or more gears. And just to show you that this is not like everything is rigid, I'll show you without the chain. And you can clearly see that the engine falls and it does not work. And this is an amazing way to save weight on a build, right? So if I had gears here, and here, and this is now all-wheel drive, but it is also completely beamless. There are no beams, right? And these beams, this is 15 kilograms each. So I just removed 30 kilograms from this vehicle. And as you can see, it works perfectly fine, aside from the center of mass being slightly off-center. And yeah, this is a bug. Not really a bug, because I don't think the devs are going to remove it. It's a very useful technique. Another way that you can use this is you can actually use these free small gears. And these free small gears have the interesting property that they can attach to pins and the pin slots, right? You can see I'm doing that right here. And you can actually chain these together. And this creates a rigid connection, a beam of any length, any dimension, so to say. So as you can see, it works. And this is a great way to save weight, right? Because each of these small free gears is 1.5 kilograms and the chain is 0.5 kilograms. So this is 3.5 kilograms versus the 15 kilograms that I was using before. It's a very great way to save weight and a great way to make your vehicle accelerate faster. For the next section, I'm going to talk about gearboxes and transmissions. So I'm just going to put these beams back for convenience. Makes it easier to build. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is the dynamic gear holder and the free gears, because these were basically built for chains. So I'm going to show you an example, a very simple example, right here. So I have these two free gears, and how the free gears work, many of you might already know because it's pretty self-explanatory, is that when you provide power to the axle that they're on, they don't power because they are free and they are free spinning. And so they do not attach themselves to the axle that they're on unless you have a gear holder. So this is a static gear holder. You can see that it can attach to this gear or it can attach to this gear. There is also a dynamic gear holder. I'm just going to put it right here to show. It has two states, right? One side and the other side. Not really left and right because you can rotate it whatever way. But what this does is it can switch between different gears, and it acts as a gear shifter, one of these gear shifters. And what you can do now is you can chain these together, and now you can see you have two different gear ratios. If you would like more information about this, a great resource is Catburger's video all about transmissions. It's amazing. I'll link it in the description. I highly recommend you check it out. As you can see here, as soon as we get up to speed, you'll see 1 and then 2. You have 2 speeds. Now this is a very simple transmission. There are more complex transmissions. I'm going to show off one more that's pretty useful. This one is going to be a 3-speed transmission, because you might think with these free gears that since these only have 2 states, you can only really make a 2-speed, but you can actually make a 3-speed. It's very cool. So this is the setup, right? And before I even add the chains, I just want to explain how this works. So there are 3 possible ways for the power from this engine to reach this axle. Way number 1 is you can just go from this medium gear to this small free gear. I'll chain that up right like this, and you can see it works. Way number 2 is it can go from this medium free gear to this small free gear, like this. And as you can see, it works, and that it switches ratios when I switch this gear holder. And the third way is from this small free gear to this small gear. And as you can see, it switches between them, and this is a simple 3-speed. I'll show you with the calculation real quick. When it gets up to speed. 2, 3. There you go. Nice 3-speed. And obviously, as you can with the old shifters, you can string together these new shifters to create, like, for example, if you had a 2-speed and a 3-speed and you chain them together, you get a 6-speed unless you had repeat ratios. But yeah. Now, you can also, with these new chains, you can use them with the old shifters. So I'll demonstrate with the 2-speed. And so you can use the chains like this, right? You can see that this the power is going through the shifter and going into the axle, but actually this chain will still exist even when you move the gear out of the way. It'll just make this stop spinning, right? And what you can then do with that is that you can put another gear next to where it would be, chain them together, and this chain will stay. It'll exist because of the rigid chains that I demonstrated earlier. And now you can make a very simple 2-speed. And I'll just demonstrate that this works real quick. Yeah, and it works. And that also works with the 3-speed transmissions. If you want to learn more about that, I highly recommend checking out Katburger's video. Again, it's an amazing resource. And if you have any questions about the chains, you can just send me a message on the Screwdriver Discord server. I'll also link that in the description, because it's a very useful resource. Anytime someone asks me or asks anyone about transmission help, I always send Katburger's video, because it's amazing. And I realized there's no similar resources about chains, which is why I am making this video. The last thing that I would like to talk about in this video is stepper motors, because they have some very interesting interactions with chains. And these stepper motors, if you do not know, they have set rotations that you can activate with keys. So these, let me show an example. Stepper motors, you can use them with chains to transmit rotation. Let me finish building this example real quick, and we'll just calculate it so I can show it. You can see when I click Q, it rotates normally, right? But there are a few quirks with this system, right? You may assume that because that works, that means that this setup would also work. This setup does not work, and I'll explain why shortly. But first, let me show. I'm clicking Q here. You can see it's not working. And the reason why is that when you chain this stepper gear to this gear and you have a hinge connector attached to it, this chain is no longer transmitting rotation. It is instead acting as a rigid chain. So as soon as I move this axle out of this pinhole, you can see that it acts as a beam and not a chain that transmits rotational power. And that's just one quirk. I don't know if this is a bug or not, but it's worth mentioning, especially if you're using these stepper motors for DRS and such, because it can be very confusing and very frustrating if you don't know this little quirk. Anyways, with all this information, I'd like to show you one of my car builds that heavily uses chains. This car right here. This car uses a very little amount of beams. It uses rigid chains for most of the connections, and I think it is pretty dang cool. Yeah, and the only really beams that does use is to attach to the downforce wings. But as I showed you with the free gears earlier, you can still attach those with chains to make your car even lighter. Anyways, that's about it. Thank you all for watching, and hope you learned something, and I hope this helps you with your next build. Take care, and goodbye.